This interview was filmed on the 16th of April, so things may have changed. Welcome back. It's my great pleasure today to introduce you to Alexandra Brits of InTouch Relocations. I've known you guys for many years. It's absolutely lovely to see you. I feel like I haven't seen you for a while. But it probably wasn't that long ago. I think it was probably in the States last year.
Yes, I think so. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on. It's lovely to see your face and to chat.
Great to see you too. Listen, first of all, where are you and where should you be?
So I'm currently down in Hermanus in the Western Cape with Coralie, and I live in Joburg, so that's where I'm based. And we came down just the day the lockdown was announced to spend the idea was to spend the Easter period with mom and dad, and to bring the kids down to their grandparents. And then that day the 3-week lockdown was announced. So we found ourselves in the situation where we had to decide, do we now go back home? We'd driven down, which is a good 14-hour drive, so we weren't that to bundle kids and dogs back into the car for another 14 hours, the very next day. At that stage, it was planned to be a 3-week lockdown, and we were all already geared to be working from home by that point. So, whether I was working from home in Joburg or working from home in Hermanus didn't really, make too much of a difference. So we decided that we'd stay on here. And, obviously the advantage being that we'd have some help with the kids and be able to get some work done. So that's something that a lot of people are struggling with at the moment, is sort of sharing the load of looking after the kids and also working from home. So yes, and now the lockdown's been extended to 5 weeks, which is obviously a little bit longer than we had planned, and we just hope that we don't overstay our welcome. But it's lovely to be here, and great for everyone to be at least spending time with each other, and having family around during this time is really, really great.
Definitely. I mean, it's really nice to hear things like that. I mean, like I said, it's not what you planned. It's not what any of us planned. But at least you're all together, and it's a from the point of view of your mum and dad, it's really lovely that they've got this extended period to really spend time with you guys and with their grandkids. I think that's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely.
You were saying to me before we started, you look out one side and you can see the mountains, and you look out the other side of the house and you can see the sea, but you can't go and see either of them, right?
I know, it's a bit depressing, but at least we have a nice view to look at. I mean, one of the wonderful things about this part of the world is, walks along the beach and, along the cliff path and in the mountains. But, at least we have a nice view. So the lockdown is still, the hard lockdown is still in full force and effect, and they're very strict. So we do occasionally take a walk to the very close shops instead of getting in the car and driving, just for a bit of kind of outdoors, which does seem to be permitted. But apart from that, it's really just trip to the shops to get essential food supplies and trips to the pharmacy or doctor, if required. And that's the only reason, we're allowed to. So unfortunately, we don't get to enjoy any of this beautiful scenery as much as we normally would.
And are they giving you any indication of whether they will loosen those restrictions anytime soon, or is it just they've said another 2 weeks and we'll decide then?
Yeah, so I think there's a briefing happening as we speak, but it's more related to what businesses can be expected, or the sort of things that businesses will have to put in place at the end of the lockdown period to be able to still keep their employees safe but be able to operate. Because obviously the challenging thing in South Africa is balancing, the impact, or everywhere in the world really, balancing the impact of the economy of shutting everything down with, the risk to life, and very difficult decisions that government need to sort of walk that fine line. So I think for the remainder of this month, the hard lockdown will remain in effect. And then thereafter, there will probably be some lessening of the restrictions, but not a full open situation, I wouldn't think. It will still be quite limited in terms of who's allowed to go back to work and under what sort of conditions, and what sort of things are put in place in workplaces, to still make them as safe as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, it is very interesting how, countries have gone down different routes with this. And I was talking to Renee Stegman, also based in Cape Town, and she was saying that they have banned the sale of alcohol. Is that still in place as well?
Yes, that is still in place. Alcohol and cigarettes are considered non-essential items. And it's quite interesting, the things that they have that they are not allowed to sell. And in some respects, it seems almost a little bit arbitrary. For example, I was in a Dischem yesterday, which is a bit like Boots in the UK. So it's a pharmacy more than a pharmacy. It's got sort of makeup and perfume and all sorts of other things. And certain sections were sort of closed off, but other sections weren't. And I couldn't really work out the logic between the two. For example, you couldn't buy makeup, not that anyone would particularly want to buy makeup, but you could buy the fanciest face cream, you could possibly want. So I don't really know, but the alcohol and cigarettes, those are still banned, and there are various theories as to why. One might be a sort of just a burden on the police force, who are already struggling, trying to maintain law and order in certain areas. Obviously alcohol can exacerbate those sorts of situations. Although it might have a slightly unintended consequence that now they're seeing quite a lot of looting of liquor stores in certain areas, where I think people are sort of getting a bit desperate, I suppose. And then cigarettes, I don't really know what that could be. Health reasons, could be a burden on the supply chain, in terms of delivering them to shops. Who knows what the reasoning is there? But yeah, that still remains a factor. And I think obviously people had planned for 3 weeks and had enough supply for the 3 weeks, and now with having to go into another 2 weeks, I can imagine there are going to be some people feeling a little itchy for a cigarette. I mean, personally, I don't smoke anymore than I used to, right. And I know that stress, that feeling of running out is not much fun. So it might be a good time to consider quitting.
Yeah, that's very true. It's just so interesting how, the enforcement of something like that is very tough. And I mean, certainly, I was talking to colleagues in Spain, Susanna Bourne, who said to me, Susanna, well, she said that alcohol purchase figures have gone up by 70% since the lockdown. But I guess that's because, they were saying that's attributed to the fact that everybody in Spain goes out. They don't necessarily drink at home. So suddenly there was a different thing. It's just very interesting. So how have things, I know you're a multi-site operation, not just in South Africa, but across the whole of Africa, at least. How are your teams in all of your various locations coping, and what's happening with them?
Yeah, so the team is doing well. I think they're obviously, we're all sharing the same kind of struggles, but they're incredibly supportive. They are working well from home. We had days to kind of gear everybody up to be able to work from home. A lot of our sort of more management level staff, account managers, have been able to work from home for quite some time, and we have a kind of flexible working arrangement where they're allowed to work from home a couple of days a month. So they were fine. Some of the sort of administrative staff, we needed to get them geared up and give them sort of access to internet and computers and all of that kind of stuff, and then also set up our system so that they could better handle everybody working away from the office. So whereas we had an on-site server, we still do have an on-site server. We had to then look at cloud solutions as well, because with everyone trying to access the server at the same time, obviously it was quite slow. So yeah, it challenged us in all sorts of ways that we hadn't thought of. We're now all on Teams and waxed on Zoom and all these millions of other platforms that we've had to become familiar with sort of overnight. And I'm very impressed with the way that the teams have handled it, and the good sort of humor that they've been able to maintain, and the camaraderie that they're all sort of keeping each other going. I think everyone has their days, and then we all sort of support them through. And some days we're better than others, and then the rest of the team kind of helps out. So a lot of our employees are, well, mostly women. A lot of them are single moms, and so they're sort of people at home with kids. So balancing the sort of care of children and the demand of homeschooling, I think, has been a challenge for everybody. We have a whole new appreciation for teachers and caregivers who look after our kids on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, it's been a real balancing act, but on the whole, the staff have been fantastic. And we have been relatively busy, but sort of not with obviously accompanied programs, but just offering support and keeping in touch with our assignees, making sure that they're okay, checking in, and then just keeping clients updated, trying to be creative around like solving problems. I think in the first week of the lockdown, we had quite a few people who were trying to still leave the country before we went into lockdown. So we had to try and negotiate around how we did handovers without actually physically being there, and, you know, properties standing vacant. So there were all sorts of questions that we had to deal with. And now it seems to have settled, and people are, you know, if they're here, they're staying, and if they're not here, they can't come. So we're just trying to plan, you know, things being pushed out and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's challenged us all, and many good things will come out of it, I'm sure, and we'll be more resilient as a result.
I agree with you. I mean, it is so interesting on so many levels. But I mean, like you say, we were kind of the same from the point of view of, you know, we had to be quite portable. You know, like you're out of the office a lot, you're traveling a lot, so we kind of got our heads around that. But I mean, when you think about, you know, you mentioned that that, you know, the pressure on your servers, and suddenly you have to go into cloud-based solutions. That's a big old thing to implement quickly. I mean, you know, and so well done on doing it, because that's not easy.
Yeah, and as you know, I don't think our contingency plans had sort of factored this scenario in at all. So, you know, we were all like, yeah, we'll be able to work from home if we need to. And then we sort of tested it, and we realized that fortunately we had a few days or a week at least, I think, where Dubai had gone on to lockdown sort of 2 weeks before us. So right. They were sort of talking to us every day and giving us feedback about what was working, what wasn't working, you know, how to structure it. For about 2 weeks before the lockdown, we were doing an A/B team sort of rotation so that we could test people's ability to work from home, and that did help. So when we went into full lockdown, we'd kind of troubleshooted a lot of the issues. So I think South Africa generally is in quite a good position because we had a bit of a lag in terms of the virus on the rest of Europe. So we've been able to learn from, you know, from the experience of other countries, both professionally and sort of as a government as well, as to what is working and what isn't working, which has been helpful.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I mean, when you talk about, so we're talking about your operations in Dubai and in South Africa, both countries with very good infrastructure, communications infrastructure, the internet's obviously very good. What about your other places across the continent?
Yeah, so our other locations in Africa, sort of varying degrees of lockdown, but I think most of them now have closed borders. So, you know, operations are the same as elsewhere in the world. Nothing is really going on. So, and for most of those locations, we have been managing them with the sort of hub set up, and then consultants all around in any event. So that works quite well. You know, in fact, our Africa Services Manager has been based in Durban in a satellite office. So she's very used to this, is kind of the norm for her. And then we have an office in Kenya, and they're also all working from home. And our consultants, we're just keeping in touch with them, you know, on a regular basis. WhatsApp is very, you know, communications in the rest of Africa are quite advanced from a point of view of there's a lot of use of technology. They tend to rely less on email, so we keep in touch, you know, by WhatsApp a lot more. But certainly, you know, they are connected. And I think people are really concerned, but as yet we haven't seen anything sort of too dramatic in terms of numbers, and as we have in some of the other countries like the US and you know, Italy, for example. We don't have any major hotspots of infection like that in Africa, which is very, very fortunate.
Absolutely.
Considering the infrastructure sort of deficit in those countries. But I think that the World Health Organization is well aware of that, and they have been focusing a lot of their resources on trying to help, you know, poorer African countries to prepare for this. So yeah, we'll just hold thumbs that
exactly.
the impact can be mitigated.
Yeah. That's very interesting what you said about everybody using WhatsApp and not so much email, because that's something I've really noticed actually, that, you know, I'm not a great one for checking my LinkedIn messages, but suddenly LinkedIn has become a much more of a hub than email. I think years ago, when we were first developing our systems designer, who at the time, Adam, he's a great guy. He was like 17 years old, genius, you know, kind of guy. He actually went to work with the UN in Africa because to set up the 3G and 4G communications networks, which, you know, were much more easy to put in place than big old internet structures with, you know, all of the landlines and everything that's involved in that. So it's great that, like you say, everyone's using WhatsApp and online platforms rather than, you know, things you
email. And mobile sort of data is quite interestingly, in South Africa, mobile data is considered to be, relatively speaking, very expensive. And one of the things that this COVID situation has brought to the fore again is pressure on the big sort of monopolistic telecoms companies, of which there are sort of 4, to reduce the pricing of that data. Because I think, especially if you're expecting people who, you know, in lower economic brackets to be self-isolating, sitting at home, they don't have the benefits that we have of, you know, uncapped internet and all of that kind of thing. They don't have maybe a garden or an outdoor space. Mobile data, it becomes really, really crucial to their ability to stay connected and be able to work or anything like that. So there's a lot of pressure now on those companies to reduce prices, and they have made a lot of websites 0 rated. So, for example, Vodacom, which is the same as Vodafone, has an education website which they have made free to access, basically. So there are really great initiatives coming out of this, which hopefully will become the new normal and will sort of open people's eyes a little bit more to, you know, the realities and the inequalities which we all know exist, but now we know we can actually do something about them because we're forced to, I suppose.
That's very interesting, because again, I mean, to be honest with you, you know, in Europe, the US, we don't really think about that because everybody has an internet line coming into their home. It's just something you accept as you know, almost as the same as you have power and water coming into your home.
Exactly. So,
you mentioned a little bit back, you know, good days and bad days, you know, amongst the teams. How are people staying positive? Because I agree with you, it's tough.
Yes, and look, I think as a leader, it's, you know, one of the challenging things to do is to motivate people during difficult times and to sort of keep them positive. So I suppose for me, I sort of just try and focus on how I can maybe sort of help other people and motivate them, and that in a way takes the focus off me. So it is sometimes quite helpful to think about how we can help others. But, you know, I think we just try to focus on the things we can control. We have been, because we're a little less busy, we can then focus on ramping up some other projects, which, you know, typically move further and further down your to-do list because you're dealing with urgent client stuff, which is always the way of things. You know, your email inbox comes first and then your project stuff comes later. So it's given us the opportunity to sort of put those higher up on the agenda. Things like, you know, our Move Me service that we've been working on for some time. You know, that app is nearly ready to go, and the scope of work for all of that, we've been doing a lot of work on. So we can focus on those things now, give them our attention. And so we've just been trying to give the staff some interesting things to focus on and some activities to keep them focused. And I think, you know, interestingly, when I read Tad's email, it really inspired me, you know, to say and to share with the employees that the work that we do here is really important. You know, we may not be doctors and nurses, and we may not be scientists finding cures and saving the world, but we support people during a really critical time. And the people that the service that we are involved in, bringing skills into countries that really need them, and you know, supporting those people when they're moving, is really valuable work. So, you know, just sharing that with the teams, that when this situation is over, our services will be needed more than ever, because skills will be needed more than ever. and we will be in a changed world. And you know, the work that they do is important. It may not be on the front line as much as other people, but to just you know, hang in there and remember that they can still add value. And we've seen some lovely you know, examples of that with our staff reaching out to people who have recently arrived in South Africa who probably feel incredibly isolated. I mean, if you can imagine sort of moving countries, you don't have a support network set up yet, your kids can't even go to school, and you know, here you find yourself in the middle of a lockdown. So we've been staying very close to you know, our clients, and they really are very appreciative of that. And that's the kind of thing that just you know, makes you feel that it's worth it. You know, what we do is valuable, and it means a lot to people.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because almost everyone I've spoken to has said actually the positivity from the teams comes from the fact that they still have a role and that they appreciate how important that role is. And I could not agree with you more. I mean, like you said, you know, it's difficult enough moving to a new country. Moving to a new country and then being faced with this, that's, you know, that touches so many psychological alarm points for all of us. So it's great that you said that. When I was talking to Beverly's son last week, she said the mobility industry is built on passion and compassion, and that's one of the best. We're gonna name a conference that. I'm so excited.
I think the next one, yeah, absolutely.
Passion and compassion. Is there anything coming through from, I mean, again, you're a multi-site organization in lots of different countries. Is there support available in Dubai? Is there support available in South Africa and Kenya?
So, I mean, I'm most familiar with, you know, the support probably in the South African context. I think Dubai sort of takes probably more of a hands-off approach with businesses and that kind of thing. South Africa is very sort of well regulated in that respect. You know, we have protection in terms of the labor law, and all of that kind of thing is quite rigorous. For employees, there's the Unemployment Insurance Fund has sort of kicked into gear and allowing people to claim if they're on short time, or if they've been put on sort of temporary redundancy if they're not able to work. So it's obviously, you know, it's not equivalent to their normal salary, but at least it's sort of helping people to get through. And then there is funding available for companies as well, in terms of various different platforms that have been put into place, some private, some government, as to how to apply for funding, just capital relief, cash flow sort of stuff to keep your business operational. Some landlords are offering tenants, whether it's in the commercial spaces, they're offering them a kind of rental holiday, where if they've had to close their operation, they can sort of pay reduced rent for a period of time, and then the landlord will recuperate it at a later stage. We haven't seen too much of that yet with regards to private residences, because landlords obviously is still under obligation to pay their various different bills that they have with relation to their property. But we are seeing banks starting to put in place quite a lot of assistance for example, home loans, asset finance, all of that kind of thing. So I think really the message is to approach the banks and then ask for, you know, for assistance with your debt sort of situation. So, and there's a lot, I mean, I must say, South Africa has really rallied, you know, to support the most vulnerable. There are a lot of initiatives, there are a lot of funds that have been put together to support, you know, the homeless and the poorest of the poor. And your average sort of working people will probably, you know, they'll get some support in terms of UIF, but I think everybody across the board will be sort of financially impacted in some way by this whole crisis. And you know, we just need to take it a day at a time and see what comes. And importantly, I think do everything that we can to keep our businesses viable, so that when we do come out the other side of it, we're sort of raring to go and can restart the economy and can make sure that, you know, jobs aren't lost and all of that kind of thing. So that's our main focus at the moment.
That's, yeah, I mean, very interesting. I was interviewing Tad and Simon Johnson on Monday because they've been working with basically all the competitors in the UK have got together in order to kind of lobby government to say exactly what you said, that, you know, when this comes to an end, the role of our industry in restarting economies all over the world is going to be huge. You know,
yes, absolutely.
We'll hit the ground running. Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you so much. Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to see you. It's been lovely to talk to you. I'd love to come back in a few weeks and we'll do this again, find out where we all are. Hopefully, I have my wooden ruler, which I'm constantly touch wood. That, you know, we'll see where we are and that, you know, things are starting to move forward. But in the meantime, it's been a pleasure to speak to you.
You too, and
take care. Thank you, and you, and enjoy. I hope that when at least you can go walking on that beach. That would be
first thing I'm going to do.
Listen,
some rain or shine.
Absolutely, lovely to see you. We'll catch up soon. Thank you so much for your time. Cheers, Alex.
You too. Bye.